It was supposed to be a quiet Christmas dinner. Just family, they said. But when I walked into my own dining room and counted the chairs, 26 of them shining under the soft yellow lights, not one was for my daughter. Have you ever been left out by the very people you built your life around? Don't scroll away. This story will make you feel every heartbeat of that pain, and the quiet power that followed. I froze near the doorway, my hands still on the frame. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of cinnamon pie. Laughter bounced off the walls, my walls, and not a single head turned toward me. My daughter stood a few steps behind, holding a plate of cookies she'd baked herself. She looked so hopeful, her eyes searching for a place, any place. But there was none. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "maybe we can sit in the kitchen." Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law turned around, her lips painted red, her tone light and cutting. "Oh, there you are," she said. "We didn't think you'd both come down so early. We've already arranged the seats. Maybe next year we'll add more space." Her voice was sugar-coated, but her eyes said something else. They glinted with a cold satisfaction that made my chest tighten. I smiled faintly. "Next year," I murmured, walking past her. My daughter stood frozen, still clutching her plate. I could feel her confusion behind me, the kind only kindness betrayed can cause. I glanced at the head of the table, where my eldest son now sat. The very chair my late husband used to sit in. The one he polished himself every Christmas morning. My son didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he raised his glass and said, "To family." The words scraped across my chest like broken glass. I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. I didn't argue, didn't ask why we were standing while strangers. His wife's cousins, her co-workers, her brother's fiancé, sat in the seats we once filled with stories and prayers. I just looked around the table, memorizing faces, laughter, and the careless way they took everything that wasn't theirs. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. My daughter touched my arm. "It's fine, Mom," she whispered. Her lips trembled as she looked at the plate she still held. They probably didn't mean it. But I did not believe that. And I think deep down neither did she. I walked toward the window, the one facing the snow-covered garden. The frost had traced delicate patterns across the glass like old lace. I watched my reflection, calm, expressionless, unreadable. Behind me the laughter grew louder. Someone told a joke about old traditions, needing to change. Someone else said, "It's better when the young ones take charge." I lifted my chin slightly, taking in the quiet power of that moment. They thought I was invisible. They thought age had softened me into silence. But silence is not weakness. It's storage. "Mom, let's just go," my daughter whispered again. I turned to her. "We will," I said softly, and she seemed startled by the steadiness in my voice. We stepped out into the cold evening, the wind biting our cheeks. She started the car, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't expect that," she said, staring at the steering wheel. "I did," I replied. Her head turned toward me, confusion clouding her eyes. "You did." I smiled faintly, brushing the snow off my coat. "You learn to see things early, dear. Especially when they start taking pieces of what you built." She frowned, not understanding. I didn't explain. Not yet. As we drove away, the lights from the house faded behind us, warm, glowing, false. I remembered the years I'd spent paying off that mortgage while my husband worked double shifts. The nights I fixed broken faucets, painted the porch, and kept that roof from leaking. Every brick in that house had a story. Every corner carried the weight of my effort. And now they sat there pretending it was theirs. At a red light, my daughter reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. "You've done nothing wrong." She looked down, her voice breaking. "I just wanted us to be with family." I stared at the snowflakes falling against the windshield. "Sometimes family forgets who built the table they eat from," I said quietly. "But life has a way of reminding them." She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. When we reached home, the house felt colder than usual. I took off my coat and walked straight to the study. There, in the bottom drawer of my desk, was a worn brown folder. My husband's handwriting still visible on the cover. I hadn't touched it in years. I ran my fingers over it slowly as though greeting an old friend. The papers inside were all neatly stacked. Property deeds, insurance documents, old letters. I pulled out one page and read the line that had once brought us relief. Property title, owner, Margaret L. Thompson. I smiled then, a quiet, knowing smile. My daughter peeked through the doorway. Mom? Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, sliding the folder back in. Just making sure I still have something that's mine. She gave me a puzzled look but didn't press further. Later that night, as she slept on the couch, I made myself tea and stood by the window again. The moonlight spilled across the yard, silver and still. I could almost hear my husband's voice. You always see through people, Maggie. I closed my eyes and whispered, they forgot who this house belongs to. The next morning I went about the day as usual. I smiled at my neighbors, fed the stray cat that came by the porch, even sent a polite text to my son thanking him for hosting such a lovely dinner. His reply was short. Of course, Mom. Glad you came. No apology. No mention of the empty chairs. Just entitlement wrapped in politeness. By noon I'd made up my mind. Not out of anger, but principle. That evening I found myself in the garage, looking at the old wooden chest my husband built. Inside were old decorations, family photos, and a small leather-bound notebook. It had my handwriting from decades ago. Budget lists, payment records, every check I'd written to keep that house running. Page after page, proof of my years of sacrifice. Proof they had forgotten. I took out the notebook and set it beside the brown folder on my desk. My hands didn't tremble. My heartbeat didn't race. For the first time in years I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground again. At dinner, my daughter noticed the calm in my face. You're quiet tonight, she said gently. I'm thinking, I replied. About them. No, I said, sipping my tea. About us. She gave a soft, uncertain smile. You're not going to let them get away with it, are you? I looked at her, her tired eyes, her kind face, her spirit bruised but unbroken. I never let anyone walk over what I built, I said quietly. But sometimes, you don't have to shout to make people hear you. A knock at the door interrupted us. It was my son holding a leftover pie and pretending it was peace. Thought you might want some, he said. I took it, smiled, and said, thank you, dear. My tone was gentle, but something in my eyes made him pause. He hesitated, then asked, Mom, everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Just making sure the home you live in stays warm this winter. He didn't understand. Not yet. When he left, I locked the door and turned off the lights. The house was quiet again except for the slow hum of the heater. I went to bed with a steady breath, the plan already forming in my mind, not out of revenge alone but justice. Because that night I realized something simple and certain. They may have taken a seat from my daughter, but they were still sitting at my table. And I was the one who owned the house. So I smiled into the darkness and whispered, next Christmas, the seating arrangement will look very different. That thought stayed with me through the night like a quiet promise. I didn't sleep much, just lay in bed listening to the hum of the heater and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The kind of silence that used to comfort me now felt sharp, deliberate, alive. Every second reminded me of what they'd done. By dawn, the frost had thickened on the windows, coating the world outside in a dull white blur. My daughter was still asleep on the couch, curled up beneath a knitted blanket that had once belonged to my husband. I made coffee, careful not to wake her, and stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the dark liquid swirling in the cup. My mind wasn't replaying the dinner, it was studying it. The way my daughter-in-law's smile had lingered just long enough to sting. The way my son had avoided my eyes when I entered the room. The careless laughter of people who never once paid a mortgage bill but called it their home. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I placed my cup down and walked to the study. The brown folder still sat there waiting. I opened it again, slowly this time, running my finger along the edges of the papers. Every line, every seal, every signature carried years of my life. There was a quiet sort of power in knowing something everyone else had forgotten. My name was still the one printed on those deeds. I wasn't planning revenge that morning. Not yet. I was simply reminding myself of what was real. When my daughter woke up, she looked at me with that hesitant kindness of someone who's still learning where safety begins and ends. Morning, Mom, she said softly, rubbing her eyes. Morning, sweetheart, I replied. She hesitated. Did they call? No, I stirred my coffee again. And they won't. Her shoulders dropped. I didn't think they'd go that far, Mom. It's like they wanted to humiliate me. I looked at her, my heart tightening. Some people mistake cruelty for control, I said. They think if they make you small, they become bigger. She nodded but didn't speak. I could tell she still blamed herself. I didn't correct her, not yet. Later that morning, I found myself standing at the living room window again, watching a thin stream of smoke rise from a chimney across the street. The neighborhood was waking up, cars starting, dogs barking, the faint chime of someone's wind bell. It felt ordinary. That was the strangest part. The world doesn't pause when your heart breaks. It just keeps moving as if nothing happened. I went back to my study and took out a blank notepad. The same one I used to track grocery lists. At the top of the page I wrote in neat handwriting, 60 days. It wasn't a threat. It was an observation. A quiet countdown no one but me needed to understand. That day I decided to go out, something I hadn't done much since my husband passed. I put on my wool coat, the same one I'd worn at his funeral, and drove to the small law office on Maple Street. Mr. Klein, my lawyer, had handled our family paperwork for years. He was in his 70s now, gentle but sharp as ever. When he saw me, his brows lifted in surprise. "Well, Margaret," he said warmly, "I didn't expect to see you before the new year. Everything all right?" I smiled faintly. "Everything's fine, Mr. Klein. I just need to review some old documents." He nodded, pulling the folder from his drawer. The same brown one I kept a copy of at home. "Still in your name, all of it. The house, the land, and the savings account. You never transferred ownership to anyone else, just as we discussed after your husband's passing." I nodded slowly. "Good." He looked at me curiously. "Thinking of updating something?" "Maybe," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just a few adjustments. I'll let you know soon." As I walked out, a gust of cold wind caught the edge of my scarf. The world outside felt clearer somehow. I wasn't powerless. They just thought I was. That evening my daughter came home from her shift at the diner. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her hair tied back loosely. "You didn't rest today, did you?" she asked, half smiling. "Rest doesn't solve everything," I said, setting down the teapot. She sighed. "You're still thinking about what happened." I looked at her, then at the flickering light above the stove. "I'm thinking about how easy it was for them to forget who made that house a home." Her face softened. "Mom, you built everything for them. You gave them everything. You don't have to prove anything now." "I don't need to prove anything," I said quietly. "But I do need to remember." She looked puzzled, but I didn't explain. That night I couldn't help but walk past their house again. The lights were still on. Through the window I could see them, my son, his wife, their friends, laughing around the same table. The one I'd bought secondhand when money was tight. The same one I sanded and painted by hand while my husband worked late. I stood across the street for a long moment. They didn't see me, of course. I was just a shadow now, one they'd grown used to stepping over. I turned back toward my car, but not before whispering something under my breath. "You'll remember one way or another." When I got home, my daughter was waiting by the door, worry etched on her face. "Mom, where did you go?" "For a walk," I said. "Just needed air." "You can't keep thinking about it like this. It'll eat you up." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Sweetheart, I'm not being eaten, I'm sharpening." She frowned, not understanding. I went to bed with that phrase still echoing in my mind. Sharpening. That's what silence does. It refines anger into something colder, cleaner. The next morning I began sorting old boxes from the attic. My husband's handwriting covered most of them. Receipts, taxes, property files. I carried them down one by one. By the time I was done, the study was filled with stacks of proof. Every bill, every repair, every improvement. All under my name. All mine. Each document I touched felt like a quiet reclaiming. They had taken space at my table, but I still held the foundation beneath their feet. By the afternoon my phone buzzed. A message from my son. "Hey Mom, we're thinking of renovating the upstairs bathroom. Hope that's fine. Love you." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "Do what you like, dear. Just remember, it's still my home." He didn't respond. Not a word. That night, when the lights were low, my daughter walked in holding 2 cups of cocoa. "You're up late again," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep." She sat beside me. "What are you planning?" I looked at her, the corners of my lips curling. "Nothing drastic. Just a reminder." "A reminder?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm but firm. Sometimes people forget who built their comfort. I'm just making sure they remember, quietly. She studied my face, unsure whether to be afraid or proud. Mom, she said after a pause, you're scaring me a little. I chuckled softly. Good. That means I'm doing something right. Outside the snow had stopped falling. The world looked clean again, untouched. I thought of the note I would soon write, 60 days, that's all. No yelling, no threats, no scenes. Just facts. As I blew out the candle on my desk, I whispered to myself, words are wasted on those who never listened. Silence will speak louder this time. And in that darkness, my decision settled fully in me. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't explain. I would simply act. Because silence, when chosen carefully, cuts deeper than words ever could. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because of anger this time, but because of clarity. The decision had already been made, I just had to carry it quietly. No more shouting matches, no more trying to make them see what they didn't want to see. I would let time do the speaking. By morning, the plan had already begun, even if they didn't know it. I woke before dawn, dressed neatly, and brewed tea like I always did. The sun hadn't risen yet. The world was still gray and hushed. I liked it that way, peaceful, almost expectant. As I sipped, I looked at the small calendar I'd pinned to the wall. The date was circled in red. Day 1. My daughter came into the kitchen, her hair messy, still wrapped in her robe. You're up early again, she said, yawning. Habit, I replied. Old women don't need much sleep. She smiled faintly but studied me for a moment. You seem calmer lately. I met her eyes. Sometimes calm means something's already decided. She didn't ask what. She didn't have to. That morning I baked bread. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to fill the house with the smell of something warm. My husband used to say a home that smells of bread can't hold bitterness for long. He was wrong, but I liked remembering him anyway. Later, when I checked my phone, there it was. My son's message in the family group chat. We're hosting another dinner next weekend. Hope everyone can make it. My daughter leaned over my shoulder to read it. He didn't invite us again, did he? I shook my head. That's fine. Some people only invite you when they need something. I typed a simple reply. Enjoy your evening. The house photographs beautifully at night. She frowned. Mom, that sounds perfectly polite, I finished with a small smile. What she didn't know was that I had already called Mr. Klein earlier that morning. I asked him to prepare an updated property statement and mail a copy to my address. No transfers, no warnings. Just quiet paperwork. Over the next few weeks, I watched them pretend everything was normal. They called sometimes. Short, casual, meaningless calls. Hi Mom, how are you? We'll visit soon. We've been so busy. The words rolled off their tongues like excuses rehearsed too many times. I always replied gently. That's all right. You'll have time soon. They didn't notice the pause before the last word. Meanwhile, I busied myself with things I hadn't done in years. I cleaned the attic. Sorted out old drawers. Found photographs of my daughter as a child, smiling in the garden wearing the little dress I'd sewn for her. Those pictures made me realize how long I'd been holding my breath, living quietly in the shadows of my own generosity. Every night before bed I'd mark an X on the calendar. Day 7. Day 15. Day 22. My silence was becoming its own ritual. One afternoon around the halfway mark I stopped by their house unannounced. My daughter begged me not to, but I needed to see it just once more. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the garden full of cars. I heard laughter before I even knocked. My daughter-in-law opened the door, her expression freezing for half a second before she smiled. Oh, Mrs. Thompson. What a surprise. Just dropped by, I said softly. Thought I'd see how the house is holding up. She laughed a little too quickly. It's wonderful. We're actually redecorating the living room. You should come see. Inside everything looked familiar but wrong. The walls I'd painted cream were now some shade of modern gray. The photographs of my husband and me were gone, replaced by glossy portraits of her family. Even the rug, the one I'd bought after saving grocery coupons for months, was rolled up in a corner, half forgotten. She gestured proudly toward the dining room. We're thinking of replacing the old table soon. It's a little outdated. I looked at that table. The same one where my husband said grace every night. My fingers grazed the wood, tracing the faint scratches where my daughter once carved her initials as a child. Outdated, she said. I see, I replied calmly. Before leaving, I paused by the doorway and said, oh, by the way, there may be some mail coming for me here. Keep an eye out. She blinked. Mail? For you? Why would? It's just legal stuff, I said. Old paperwork. Nothing to worry about. Her smile faltered for a second. Just long enough for me to notice. That evening, my daughter was waiting when I came home. Did you see them? She asked quietly. Yes. And? Still pretending. She frowned. Mom, how can you be so calm about it? Because pretending takes effort, I said. And effort exhausts people faster than guilt ever does. From that day, I noticed small cracks forming in their facade. My son started calling less, but when he did, he sounded tired, cautious. My daughter-in-law posted fewer pictures online. The tone of her texts grew sharper, defensive, as if she sensed something shifting but couldn't name it. Then around day 40 the envelope arrived. Plain, brown, unremarkable, just like the one in my drawer. I opened it slowly, my hands steady. Inside was the official notice of property ownership renewal, confirming that the house remained mine, undisputed and uncontested. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slipped it into my purse. That night I called my son. Hello, dear. How's the house? He sounded distracted. Fine, Mom. Why? Oh, no reason, I said. I just wanted to remind you about something. What's that? 60 days, I said. Do you know how long that is? There was silence on the other end. What do you mean? Nothing, sweetheart. Just curious. I hung up before he could ask more. When I turned around, my daughter was standing behind me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She said softly. I smiled. I'm not enjoying it. I'm restoring balance. Balance. Yes, I said. They took something from you, not just a seat. They took respect. I'm just taking back what was always mine. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. For the first time, I think she understood. The following days passed quietly, almost too quietly. I went about my life as though nothing had changed. Grocery shopping, reading by the window, watering my plants. But every evening I'd glance at the calendar, and that red circle around day 60 grew bolder in my mind. On day 58 I received another message. This time from my daughter-in-law. Hey Mrs. Thompson, I think there's some confusion with the mail we received. It's got your name on it, but it's addressed to this house. Should I open it? I replied, no dear. You'll know soon enough what it says. 2 hours later my phone rang. My son's voice was tight, defensive. Mom, what's going on with the house paperwork? I kept my tone soft. Just keeping things in order, dear. I don't want anyone burdened with responsibilities they didn't earn. Are you threatening us? He snapped. No, I said calmly. Just reminding you of where you sit. He fell silent. I could almost hear his breath catch. That night, as I crossed off the final 2 days, my daughter joined me by the window. You're really going to do it, aren't you? Yes. Her voice trembled. They'll hate you. I smiled. Then they'll finally feel something true. The snow began to fall again, soft, steady, unbothered. I watched it for a long time, feeling the strange calm of a storm that no longer scared me. 60 days. I'd given them, every one of them, in silence. They'd used those days to pretend they still had control. They'd spent them laughing, redecorating, living comfortably in something they thought belonged to them. And now the clock had finished its count. Tomorrow I wouldn't have to say a single word. My silence had already spoken for me. That thought carried me through the night like a secret rhythm only I could hear. I lay still in bed, the moonlight slanting through the curtains, tracing faint silver lines across the floor. It was quiet but not empty. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm, a stillness too sharp to last. By morning the sky was the color of ash. I woke early, dressed in my dark blue coat and brewed tea. My daughter watched from the kitchen doorway, still in her robe. Is it time? She asked softly. I nodded. It's time. She didn't speak after that. She just poured herself coffee and sat with me in silence. We didn't need words. Some moments are too heavy for sound. At exactly 9 o'clock there was a knock at the door. Not frantic, not loud, just firm. I opened it to find 2 movers and a man in a gray suit standing in the cold. The lawyer Mr. Klein had recommended for the paperwork. He greeted me politely, his breath visible in the chill. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "we're ready to proceed when you are." I nodded. "You have the documents?" He lifted a folder. "Signed and sealed. All in your name." My daughter's eyes widened slightly. "So this is it," she murmured. "This is it," I said. We drove in silence to the house. Their house, though not for much longer. The street looked the same as always, lined with bare trees and melting snow. But I felt something different in the air. Something final. When we pulled up, there were cars in the driveway again. Laughter spilled through the windows. The sound of clinking glasses floated into the cold morning air. For a brief moment I almost smiled at the irony, celebration on the day of reckoning. I stepped out of the car, clutching my purse and the folder. My shoes sank slightly into the slush. My daughter followed quietly behind me. The lawyer nodded at the movers. "Wait for my signal," he said. I rang the bell. It took a moment before the door opened. My daughter-in-law appeared, her hair perfectly done, a wine glass in her hand. Her expression froze when she saw us. "Oh," she said, her tone brittle. "You didn't call ahead." "I didn't need to," I replied. Behind her, voices carried through the living room. Music, laughter, the faint hum of conversation. Someone said, "Who's at the door?" She stepped aside reluctantly and I walked in. The house smelled of expensive candles and roasted meat. The rug had been replaced, the furniture rearranged. Even the walls looked different. My family photos were still missing. My son appeared from the kitchen wearing a forced smile. "Mom, what brings you here?" I met his eyes. "Business." He frowned. "Business." The lawyer stepped forward, holding the folder. "Mr. Thompson, I represent your mother's legal interests. We'll need everyone currently residing here to gather in the living room." Confusion rippled through the house. My daughter-in-law's smile disappeared completely. "What's this about?" she demanded. I said nothing. Within minutes, everyone was seated, or rather, pretending to be. The laughter had stopped. The music still played faintly from a speaker, some cheerful tune that now felt cruelly out of place. My daughter stood beside me, her face calm, though her hands trembled slightly. The lawyer opened the folder and began to read. As per the original deed filed under the late Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, ownership of the property has remained solely under Mrs. Thompson's name. No formal transfer of title has been executed, rendering all secondary claims invalid. He paused to look up, his voice steady. Effective immediately, all occupants are required to vacate the premises within the term specified by law. That term has expired. Mrs. Thompson is exercising her right to reclaim possession. The words echoed like thunder in that warm, decorated room. My son stood abruptly. "Mom, this can't be real." "It's real," I said softly. "And legal." My daughter-in-law's face went pale. "You're evicting your own family? On what grounds?" I looked at her evenly. "On the grounds that family doesn't exclude my child from my table." The silence that followed was suffocating. She opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed nervously. "You can't just, this is absurd." The lawyer folded the papers neatly. "It's done, ma'am. The movers are here to assist." That's when the shouting began. My son's voice cracked between disbelief and desperation. "You're doing this because of one dinner? One misunderstanding?" I stared at him and for a moment I almost pitied him. "It wasn't one dinner," I said. "It was every small cruelty that came after. Every time you pretended not to see the hurt you caused. Every silence you mistook for forgiveness." He looked like a child then, lost and angry. "Mom, please. We can fix this. You don't have to do this." "I already have," I replied. My daughter-in-law slammed her glass onto the table, red wine spilling across the surface. "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "I regret giving you comfort you never earned." The lawyer gestured toward the door and the movers began their work, carefully, efficiently, without emotion. One by one boxes were carried out. The laughter that had once filled the house was replaced by footsteps and muffled protests. My daughter stayed beside me, silent. Her hand brushed mine once, a brief touch of quiet solidarity. As I looked around, memories surfaced uninvited. The birthday candles, the smell of Sunday pancakes, my husband's laughter. The echoes of a life that used to belong here. For a fleeting second my heart ached. But then I looked at my daughter standing tall beside me and the ache turned into resolve. My son stopped in front of me, his eyes red. "Where are we supposed to go?" "You'll manage," I said. "You always do when it benefits you." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt her." "Then maybe next time," I said quietly, "you'll mean to care." The movers carried the last box through the door. The lawyer handed me a pen. "Sign here, Mrs. Thompson," he said. I signed without hesitation. The sound of the pen scratching paper was oddly satisfying. Final, deliberate, absolute. When it was done, I walked to the dining table. The new one. Sleek, soulless, expensive. I traced a finger along the edge, then knocked on it lightly. "Hollow," I said under my breath. My daughter heard me and smiled faintly. As we left, my son called after me, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, where are we supposed to spend Christmas now?" I turned back, meeting his eyes one last time. "You should have thought of that before taking her seat." Then I stepped outside. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that stings your lungs when you breathe it in. But it felt pure. Cling. Behind me, the door closed with a soft thud. The lawyer locked it and handed me the keys. "It's yours again, Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly. I nodded. It always was. We stood in silence as the last of the movers left. My daughter slipped her arm through mine. "Mom," she whispered, "are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm done pretending." As we walked toward the car, snow began to fall again, light, steady, endless. It landed softly on my coat, on her hair, on the driveway that finally belonged to us again. And for the first time in a long while, the only sound in the air was peace. The snow fell softly as we walked away from the house. The same house that had once been filled with laughter that didn't include us. Now the laughter was gone, swallowed by silence and falling snow. I held the keys tightly in my palm, their metal cold but comforting. My daughter's hand slipped into mine as we walked to the car. Neither of us spoke during the drive back. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, slicing through the snow, while the world outside blurred into shades of gray and white. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was finally returning home. When we arrived, the smaller house, our true home, felt warmer than ever. The heater hummed softly, and the familiar scent of cinnamon and old wood filled the air. My daughter took off her coat and looked around the living room, then back at me. "It's quiet," she said. "Yes," I replied, setting the keys on the table. "Peaceful quiet, not the kind that hides something." She smiled faintly. "It feels different today." "It should," I said. "It's the first day we stop carrying their noise." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "You did it, Mom." I turned to her. "No, we did it. You stood with me when I couldn't stand alone. That's more than any of them ever did." For a moment she just stared at me and then she hugged me, tight, trembling. I could feel her heartbeat against mine, and for the first time since that awful Christmas, her body didn't shake from shame or hurt, but from relief. We spent that evening cleaning, quietly reclaiming our rhythm. She dusted the shelves, humming softly while I made soup from scratch. The scent of garlic and thyme filled the kitchen. The sound of her humming was the kind of music I'd missed. Gentle, real, unperformed. Later, as we sat at the dining table, the old wooden one my husband built himself, she looked up and said, "Do you think they'll ever understand why you did it?" I stirred my soup slowly. "Maybe one day. But understanding isn't the point. I didn't do it to teach them. I did it to free us." She nodded thoughtfully, her eyes lowering to the table. "I used to hate this table," she whispered. "After Dad passed, it just felt empty. Like we were always waiting for someone who never came." I smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time to fill it again. Not with people who use us, but with peace." That night, I lit a single candle and placed it at the center of the table. The flame flickered gently, casting golden light across the wood. My daughter poured 2 cups of tea and we sat there not speaking for a while. The silence was full, not empty. When the clock struck 9, she looked up. "Do you miss him?" Her question caught me for a moment. "Every day," I said. "But tonight I feel closer to him than I have in years. Because he would have done the same." I could almost hear his voice in the quiet, calm and proud. "You kept what we built, Maggie." I reached into my purse and took out the keys, the ones to the house I had just reclaimed. My daughter watched as I placed them on the table beside the candle. "What will you do with them?" she asked. I looked at the keys, the metal glinting in the candlelight. I'll hold on to them for now. Maybe one day I'll sell that house. Or maybe I'll turn it into something useful. A shelter, a space for someone who truly needs it. Her brows lifted. You'd do that? Why not? I said. Let something good grow from what they tried to destroy. For a moment, we both stared at the flickering candlelight reflecting off the keys. Then, without planning it, we began to talk, really talk. About old memories. About her childhood. About my husband. About all the things we had swallowed in silence for years. At some point she laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in so long that it startled me. It wasn't forced. It was soft, genuine, almost childlike. I felt my chest tighten with warmth. I haven't heard you laugh like that in years, I said. She smiled. I forgot what it felt like. Well, I said, leaning back in my chair, it sounds like home. We talked until the candle burned low, and then she stood to wash the cups. I stayed at the table, tracing the grain of the wood under my fingers. Every scratch, every mark, every imperfection told our story. Hard work, loss, resilience. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, bright and clean. I made breakfast while my daughter set the table. 2 plates. 2 cups. Simple. Enough. We ate quietly, the kind of quiet that feels like healing. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my son. We moved out. I hope you're happy, Mom. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, I am. Take care of yourself. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The words had already done what they were meant to. When I set the phone down, my daughter reached over and touched my hand. Do you feel lighter now? She asked. Yes, I said. Because now everything fits again. Even the silence. She squeezed my hand, smiling. Later that afternoon, I opened the windows to let in fresh air. The curtains fluttered gently, and I could hear the faint hum of the world outside. Birds, wind, distant laughter from a neighbor's yard. Life ordinary and undemanding. I went to the drawer, took out my husband's old photo, and placed it on the table beside the candle. His kind eyes looked out from the frame, and I whispered, It's ours again. The wind picked up for a moment, rattling the window pane softly as if he'd heard. That evening my daughter made tea again, and we sat together like before. The candle flickered, the tea steamed, and outside, snowflakes danced against the glass. I was thinking, she said after a while, maybe next Christmas we should invite a few people over. Just the ones who've stood by us. I smiled. Yes. But this time we'll choose the seats ourselves. She laughed, nodding. And if there's not enough room? Then we'll build a bigger table, I said. We both laughed softly at that. The kind of laughter that doesn't wound, it heals. As the night settled around us, I realized something simple and final. Revenge hadn't hardened me. It had freed me. It wasn't about taking back a house. It was about taking back my voice, my peace, my worth. I stood and looked around the room, at the warm light, the photographs, the quiet comfort of things that truly belonged. My heart felt full, steady. I picked up the candle, blew it out gently, and whispered, We're home. The room sank into soft darkness, but it wasn't empty. It was calm. Whole. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living again, at a table that finally belonged to us. If this story touched something deep in you, don't leave just yet. Subscribe for more stories of strength, betrayal, and the kind of revenge that speaks without shouting.